The night carried no moon 3 decades ago when they lit the pyres. Two stakes stood in the clearing, each wrapped with oil-soaked kindling, each holding a woman whose only crime was existing at the wrong intersection of power and fear. Lydia Cross, 8 months pregnant and still singing prayers to a goddess who had stopped listening, swayed in her chains as the torchbearers approached. Beside her, Maria Ashford gripped her friend's hand through the gap between their stakes, whispering words no one else could hear. 300 witnesses packed the forest clearing in Oregon's Cascade Mountains, their breaths forming clouds in air that had grown unnaturally cold. The Council of Elders sat in their carved chairs, faces impassive as stone, while the AlphaKing, old and broken by decisions he'd already made, watched from his throne without speaking. His son stood 30 feet away, restrained by 4 guards who struggled to hold the thrashing young man as he screamed himself hoarse. Donovan Blackwood was 32 that night, still young enough to believe strength mattered. His mother's eyes found his across the crowd, and something passed between them that would haunt him for 30 years. Not goodbye, not forgiveness, just a question he'd spend his life failing to answer. 10 feet to Van's left, Victor Ashford held his 10-year-old son against his chest, one hand clamped over the boy's mouth to muffle his cries. Victor's wedding ring caught firelight as he squeezed tighter. But children always see what you try to hide. Thomas's eyes were wide and wet, memorizing features that would be ash by dawn. The head elder raised his hand. Torches touched wood. Flames climbed with unnatural speed. Lydia sang louder as fire reached her feet, not screaming, singing. The old blessing the one Luna had sung for centuries before council had decided power should belong only to men who could be controlled. Her voice carried across the clearing over the crowd into the forest beyond, where an ancient tree stood witness. Then Thomas broke free. Small hands clawed Victor's grip away, small legs pumping toward the pyre before anyone could react. The boy made it 15 feet close enough to feel heat from the flames, close enough to see his mother's face twist from serenity to horror. The guard's arrow took him in the back. Clean shot, professional, no hesitation. Thomas crumpled mid-stride, and the sound Victor made wasn't human. He reached his son before the body stopped twitching, gathered the small form into his arms, and his screams mixed with Van's until they became a single chord of masculine anguish the forest would remember. The fire took both women within minutes. Lydia's blessing cut off mid-phrase, replaced by silence so complete it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Then the tree died. The ancestral tree that had stood for 8 centuries simply stopped living. Every leaf withered and fell in the space of 5 heartbeats. By the time the pyres burned down to coals, the tree was a corpse standing watch over 2 murders and 3 destroyed men. Van broke first. He tore free from the guards, crossed the clearing in seconds, and fell to his knees in the ashes that had been his mother. His hands scooped gray powder that was still warm, trying to gather something that could never be gathered again. The AlphaKing finally rose from the throne and approached, but Van's voice stopped him cold. "I will never be you." Victor stayed with Thomas's body until dawn, rocking the small corpse and whispering apologies that changed nothing. When council guards finally approached, Victor looked up with eyes that had gone somewhere else entirely. He stood, laid his son gently on the ground, and walked away without looking back. The wedding ring stayed on his finger. Everything else he left behind. Cole Steele, 31, buried his sister under the tree's dead roots, trampled in the crowd stampede. No ceremony, no witnesses, just dirt and silence, and the beginning of a choice that would define the next 30 years. He could become like Van or Victor, or he could become something neither would understand until too late. 3 men walked away from that clearing. 3 paths diverged. And 3 decades later, a woman who should never have existed would force them to converge again. The great hall of Blackwood Keep smelled like old wood and older fear on the morning Donovan Blackwood felt mortality for the 3rd time. The first had been his mother's death. The second had come 6 months ago when the doctor's hands had trembled while explaining what the scans showed. This third arrived as he watched an accused Alpha kneel before the throne and understood with perfect clarity that he'd become the man he'd sworn to destroy. Van was 62 now, hair more silver than black beard trimmed close to hide gray that had crept in. Scars across his knuckles told stories he'd stopped sharing. The tremor in his left hand came and went worse when tired, which was most days. 6'5", still broad enough to fill doorways, but there was brittleness to him, that careful observers noticed. The accused Alpha Marcus, some minor noble, had questioned Van's latest trade agreement. Not even loudly, just mentioned in passing that perhaps the terms favored the East more than necessary. Van's voice carried without him needing to raise it, "You challenge my judgment." The verdict came without deliberation: exile. 3 days to settle your affairs, your lands revert to the crown. Exile was death by another name. Everyone knew it. Marcus walked from the hall with his head up, and Van watched while feeling absolutely nothing. 3 decades of feeling nothing had calcified into something he couldn't remember how to break. The council session afterward lasted 2 hours. Van approved, denied, or deferred based on calculations that had become instinct. Keep the strong in line. Crush dissent before it organized. Never show weakness. Lord Victor Ashford sat 3 seats from the head table, silver hair, immaculate fingers steepled. He was 60 now, still elegant in ways Van had never mastered. When Victor spoke, it was with careful courtesy of someone addressing a loaded weapon. "My king, regarding the Western Territories' request, perhaps a compromise might serve long-term interests." Van didn't look at him directly. They'd stopped making eye contact years ago. "Do not speak to me of long-term interests, Victor. You know better." The words hung heavy with shared history. Victor's jaw tightened, but he nodded and said nothing more. Cole Steele waited until the hall emptied before approaching. 61 and still moving like age hadn't touched him. Cole had been Van's beta since they were 20, the only person left who remembered Van before the darkness settled in permanent residence. Cole poured whiskey without asking, settled into the chair Victor had vacated. The ritual was decades old. "You were brutal today, even for you." Van took the glass but didn't drink. Kingdom needs strength. Kingdom needs a king with a soul. Cole leaned back. "You're 62, Van. What legacy are you leaving?" The question hit harder than it should have. Legacy. Van had built an empire of fear, crushed every threat, turned the council into a rubber stamp. His territories were stable borders, secure authority absolute. No Luna had risen in 3 decades. He'd succeeded at everything he'd set out to do, and he felt empty in ways that made his chest ache worse than the disease eating his lungs. "I kept them safe," Van said roughly. "No Luna has threatened the peace. That's legacy enough." Cole didn't flinch from the lie. "You've built a prison and called it paradise. People obey because they're terrified. Marcus wasn't wrong about that trade agreement. It does favor the East. But you couldn't admit that without looking weak." Before Van could respond, a guard entered. "My king, news from the Cascade Mountains. The ancestral tree has bloomed. White flowers, thousands of them. Witnesses say it happened overnight." The whiskey glass shattered in Van's hand. Blood mixed with amber liquid, but the only thing that registered was the impossible fact hanging in the air. 3 decades. The tree standing dead and gray. And now it bloomed. Cole was on his feet, gripping Van's shoulder, the mate bond. Van nodded, unable to speak. Cole's response was immediate. "Then we ride." Van wanted to argue. He was 62. She was 24. She was Lydia's daughter. The bond was wrong twisted. But the pull wouldn't stop, and somewhere 500 miles south, Elena was in danger. He could feel like it was happening to him. "I'm too old for this," Van said hollowly. "Too broken." Cole's hands gripped his shoulders. "Then be better. You've got time left. Use it. Protect her the way you should have protected Lydia." Elena Cross was scrubbing stone floors for the last time, though she didn't know it yet. Sacred Grove Sanctuary's great hall smelled like centuries of incense and decades of misery. 24 years here. 24 years of being told she was cursed, broken, a stain that could never be cleaned away. But Elena wasn't broken. She'd learned survival meant hiding what you felt, showing only what they expected. So she scrubbed with her head down and mouth shut, and inside anger burned steady and cold. 6 more months until she'd saved enough to disappear. 6 months to freedom, Mother Superior. Catherine's voice cut through silence. "You missed a spot." Elena didn't look up. "Yes, Mother Superior." Catherine's footsteps approached. 24 years, and you still can't clean properly. Perhaps the fields would suit you better. There it was. The fields meant 12-hour days exposure starvation. The fields meant dying slowly. Elena's fingers tightened on the brush, but her voice stayed neutral. "I'll do better." That evening, Sister Margaret found her in the herb garden carrying a covered plate. Maggie was 67, round-faced and soft-spoken, the only person in 24 years who'd looked at Elena with something other than disgust. Eat quickly, before Catherine comes. Elena wolfed down real food-bred cheese, fresh vegetables. When she finished, Maggie's hand caught her wrist. Don't leave tonight. Elena froze. She'd been so careful. How did Maggie know? I've watched you count coins you thought no one saw, Maggie said. But you can't leave, not yet. There's something about your mother. She pulled a tarnished medallion from beneath her robes, pressed it into Elena's palm. Your mother was Lydia Cross. She was Luna, the last one. They burned her for being too powerful. You're not cursed, Elena. You're Luna's daughter. The world tilted. Elena stared at the medallion, a wolf beneath a full moon surrounded by flowers. The tree bloomed last night, Maggie continued, after being dead for 3 decades. I think it was waiting for you. Elena's laugh came bitter. So they're sending me to the fields before I figure it out. She stood, decision crystallizing. Where's the tree? Maggie's voice went hoarse. Elena, no. But Elena was already moving. The ancestral tree stood in a clearing 20 minutes from the sanctuary. Elena knew the path by heart. She'd come here as a child, back when she'd still believed prayer might save her. Except it wasn't dead anymore. White flowers covered every branch, glowing with soft light that turned the clearing into something from dreams. The scent hit first honey and moonlight, and something wild that made her teeth ache. The tree was massive trunk, wide enough that 10 people couldn't circle it. Elena approached slowly, the pull in her chest growing stronger. Not compulsion, recognition. Like coming home after a lifetime of exile. She stopped at the base, one hand rising. If you're real, if Mother was real, show me. Give me something to fight for. Her palm pressed against bark that felt warm. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then power detonated through her body. Bones cracked and reformed. Muscles tore and rebuilt. Her spine bent and straightened, hands stretched and clawed jaw extended, until teeth that had never existed scraped her bottom lip. The pain consumed everything, and Elena heard herself scream a sound that started human and ended somewhere else. The shift completed in seconds. Full wolf, not arrested halfway. Golden eyes blazed. Black fur rippled across muscle. Her senses exploded, hearing that caught heartbeats, half a mile away, scent that told stories, vision that saw colors she had no names for. And beneath it all, something ancient stirred. An awareness that whispered she wasn't just Wolf, she was Luna. 500 miles north in Blackwood Keep, Donovan Blackwood woke with a gasp. His wolf surged forward, and suddenly he wasn't in his chambers. He was seeing through different eyes. Standing in a clearing, bathed in silver-white light, a tree that glowed, and at its base a massive black wolf with golden eyes that saw him across 500 miles and knew him. The mate bond snapped into place like a chain wrapping around his ribs. Through the connection, he felt her rage and grief and hunger for something more than scraps. His wolf snarled, "Mine." Van came back to himself on the floor, gasping. The certainty settled into his bones with weight that couldn't be denied. She was Lydia's daughter, and the universe had just bound him to her in a way that would force him to confront every failure of the last 3 decades. No, he whispered, not now, not her. But the bond didn't care. It pulled toward her like gravity. Cole burst through the door, the mate bond. Van nodded. Cole pulled him to his feet. Then we ride. Now. Within 10 minutes, they were mounted and riding into darkness. Elena returned to the sanctuary in the gray hour before dawn, her shift reversed, body shaking. She'd stolen a robe from a wash line and climbed to the stable loft where she'd always slept. But something felt wrong, more people than usual, voices sharp with urgency. She peered through gaps in the wood and saw horses, 8 of them, bearing riders in mismatched armor. Mercenaries, a rough voice. Lord Ashford's instructions are clear. Find the girl, dead or alive, but he prefers dead. Catherine's voice responding, she'll be in the fields at dawn, easy enough to take her there. The rough voice again, we don't care how it looks, we care that she's gone before the AlphaKing arrives. Elena's breath stopped. They were coming for her, and someone was riding south to find her. The mate bond pulsed in her chest, and she understood who was coming. The wolf whose eyes she'd seen across impossible distance. She could run, but running meant they won. Running meant her mother burned for nothing. Elena made a different choice. She shifted to wolf and moved through shadows toward the forest. Not fleeing, hunting. She tracked the mercenaries to their camp at the sanctuary's edge. 8 men confident and careless. Her wolf wanted blood, but 8 was too many. She never got the chance. A net dropped over her from above, silver-threaded and burning where it touched fur. Elena's howls split the dawn, and mercenaries poured from tents with weapons drawn. Within seconds, she was wrapped tight and being dragged toward horses. The rough-voiced leader stood over her, crossbow aimed at her skull. "Lord Ashford will pay extra for confirmed kill." Elena shifted back to human, the change forced by pain. "Why, what did I do?" "You're Luna's daughter, that's enough." They tied her with rope, threw her onto a horse, and rode toward the village. Elena's mind raced, calculating escapes that all ended with arrows in her back. The mate bond pulled tighter, screaming that help was coming, but help was hours away, and her execution would take minutes. The village square had been prepared. A wooden stake, kindling piled around it, oil-soaked and ready. The sun was barely clearing the horizon, and already a crowd had gathered. Elena fought as they tied her to the stake. Kicked, bit, clawed, screamed. But 8 men against one exhausted woman ended the way it always did. The leader stood before her, torch lit. "By authority of Lord Victor Ashford, this woman is condemned for witchcraft. Let her burn as warning." Elena's voice came raw. "You're killing me for my mother's crime. What was that crime? Being strong, being woman." Some in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. The leader moved quickly, lowering the torch toward oil-soaked wood. Elena watched flame descend and thought, "I'm 24, and I'm going to burn like my mother burned." Then hoofbeats thundered from the forest. Van saw the smoke before he saw the village. The mate bond screamed that she was at the center of it. They'd pushed the horses beyond safety, covering 500 miles in 5 days, through force of will and chemical fear. But they were too late. Van could see the pyre, see the figure tied to the stake, see flames climbing, and his mind wasn't in the present anymore. He was 32 again, watching his mother burn, held back by guards he couldn't overcome, screaming while his father sat on a throne and did nothing, feeling rage and helplessness congeal into something that would define 3 decades. Van's body locked up, hands frozen, legs unable to move, breath trapped. The PTSD was absolute, and part of him understood he was about to fail again. Cole's voice cut through, "Van, move." But Van couldn't. His vision was doubling, seeing the present pyre and the one from 30 years ago. Cole grabbed his shoulder, shook hard. "She's saving herself. Look." Van's eyes focused just in time to see Elena do the impossible. The fire touched her feet. Pain registered in her scream. But instead of surrendering, something in her erupted. Power that Van felt through the bond, raw and devastating. The flames blew back. The ropes incinerated. The wooden stake splintered, and Elena tore free, shifting mid-leap to full wolf form that landed in a crouch. Her eyes blazed gold. Her snarl echoed across the square, and every wolf-blooded person felt the weight of Luna presence pressing down like atmosphere at the bottom of the ocean. The crowd panicked, scattered. The mercenary leader raised his crossbow, but Elena moved faster. She covered 15 feet in a heartbeat, jaws closing on the man's wrist. The crossbow clattered away, and the mercenary's scream was brief before her claws opened his throat. Van watched her take down 3 more in seconds. Efficient, brutal. The remaining 4 ran. She bounded toward the forest, and Van finally kicked his horse forward, paralysis breaking. The mate bond pulled him after her. Elena collapsed a half-mile in her shift, reversing in painful spasms that left her human and gasping. Van found her in a small clearing, naked and shaking burns covering her feet and ankles. Van dismounted carefully, making noise. "Elena Cross, I knew your mother." Her head snapped up, and Van felt the impact of those green eyes, Lydia's eyes like a physical blow. Elena's voice came hoarse. "Everyone knew my mother. She's why I'm cursed." Van moved closer, hands visible. "You're not cursed. You're what I failed to protect 3 decades ago." Understanding flickered, followed by rage. "You're the one, the son who watched her burn and did nothing." The accusation landed perfectly because it was true. Van nodded, "Yes. Elena's laugh came bitter. And now you're here to finish the job. Van pulled off his riding cloak, held it out. I'm here because I owe your mother a debt I can never repay. And because the universe decided to bind me to you in ways I don't deserve. Elena stared at the cloak. The mate bond. I felt it. Van nodded. I'm 62. You're 24. You're Lydia's daughter. The bond is duty, not romance. I'll protect you as I should have protected her. Nothing more. Something in her expression shifted. And if I don't want protection, then I'll give you money, resources, safe passage wherever you want. Free you if I can find a way. Elena took the cloak, wrapped it around herself, stood. Why did they kill her? The real reason. Van met her eyes, decided truth was the least he owed. Because she was Luna. Could unite packs that hated each other, heal wounds that should have been fatal, broadcast truth that powerful men wanted buried. The council feared her. So they called her heretic and burned her. Elena absorbed this. And you let them. Not accusation anymore. Statement of fact. Van couldn't deny it. I let them. I was 32 and powerless and terrified. So I watched her burn and spent 3 decades making sure I was never powerless again. Elena studied him. Did it work? Are you powerful now? Van's laugh came hollow. I'm the most powerful man in the Northern Territories. And I'm dying alone, hated by everyone, including myself, so no. Before Elena could respond, more hoofbeats approached. Van's hand went to his sword, positioning himself between Elena and the sound. Lord Victor Ashford sat astride a gray mare, silver hair, catching morning light. He held a crossbow aimed directly at Elena's chest. Van's voice dropped to a growl. Lower the weapon, Victor. Victor's aim didn't waver. I can't do that, Van. You know why she has to die. Van moved to full cover. You won't touch her. Victor's expression flickered with pain. Then you'll doom her. Your court will tear her apart. At least my way is fast. Elena's voice cut through. I'm not dying today. She stepped around Van, facing Victor. Her hands rose and Van felt power gathering Luna abilities she didn't know how to control. Elena's words came firm. You want to kill me because you think I'll bring destruction. But destruction is already here. Her power erupted, not physically, mentally. She reached out, grabbed both Van and Victor's minds, and broadcast a memory neither wanted to see. Suddenly, Van was experiencing the night from Lydia's perspective, feeling her terror as they chained her, feeling her love for the daughter she'd never meet, feeling her final thought, don't let them make you monsters. Victor collapsed off his horse, and Van fell to his knees. Both men gasped like drowning, and tears Van hadn't cried in 30 years burned tracks down his face. Victor's sobs were rawer because the memory included Maria, his wife, burning beside Lydia. Elena's voice came distant. You've both spent 3 decades becoming exactly what she feared. You can't undo the past. You can only choose what comes next. The broadcast cut off. Van came back gasping. Victor lay curled on the ground, making sounds no grown man should make. The crossbow had fallen useless. Cole approached carefully, helped Van stand. What happened? Van's voice came wrecked. She showed us. Luna's death. From her perspective, Victor and I both saw our mothers burn. Elena swayed, blood trickling from her nose. She'd used her last reserves to break 2 men who'd been drowning in grief for 30 years. Victor finally pushed himself up, face wet and destroyed. I can't. I see Maria in her. Van's response came automatic. Then help me protect her. Victor's laugh was jagged. From what you me counsel, we're all threats. Elena's voice cut through. Then stop being threats. Maybe spend what's left building something better. The silence stretched. Finally, Van spoke. I'm taking her to Blackwood Keep. She needs training protection. Victor's objection came weak. Council will demand her death. Van met his old friend's eyes for the first time in years. Then they'll go through me. And maybe through you too. If you remember the men we were before that night destroyed us. Victor stared back. 30 years of being enemies. 40 years of being brothers before that. One night that had killed both relationships. Victor's response came slow. I have weeks, maybe a month. Cancer. The doctors say I should have been dead already. Van felt the words land, then spend it doing something that matters. Help me protect her. Victor looked at Elena, really looked. She has Maria's defiance, Lydia's strength. If I kill her, I kill the last piece of them that's left. Elena's voice came soft. I'm not a piece of anyone. I'm myself. Victor's smile was broken but genuine. Yes, you are. And maybe that's enough. They rode for Blackwood Keep as an uneasy alliance. 5 days on horseback taught Elena things the sanctuary never could. Van's hands shook worse in the mornings. Victor rode with his left hand pressed against his ribs, hiding pain. Cole watched both men with exhaustion of someone who'd spent decades keeping broken things functional. Van's lessons came in fragments. Council will test you, not because they want to verify your Luna they already know. They'll test because they want you to fail publicly. Elena absorbed this while her burns healed with speed that should have been impossible. How do I make them afraid to kill me? Van's smile was sharp. You make them more afraid of what happens if they try. Victor mapped the council's factions, who held which territories where the fault lines ran. His voice stayed neutral, never quite meeting Elena's eyes. On the third night, Victor approached where Elena sat cleaning a sword Cole had given her. His words came quiet. Maria would have liked you. She had that same quality refusal to be diminished. Elena kept her attention on the blade. Catherine said my mother sang while they burned her. That true Victor's silence stretched. Yes, old blessing. The one Lucas sang before council decided women with power were threats. Elena's hand stilled. Did your wife sing too? Victor's voice cracked slightly. She tried. Smoke took her voice first. Elena looked at him directly for the first time. I'm not here to replace them. I'm just trying to survive long enough to figure out what I know. Victor met her gaze. That's enough. Surviving is always enough. Blackwood Keep rose from the mountainside like something carved by violence. Black stone towers caught no light. Narrow windows positioned for archers. Walls thick enough to withstand siege. They rode through gates that required 6 men to open into a courtyard packed with bodies. Noble servants, warriors. Every eye tracked Elena, and whispers started before her horse stopped. That's her half-starved thing. Probably seduced him with hedge witch trick. Elena's wolf stirred, wanting to show teeth. Van's hand found her wrist. Not yet. Van dismounted, helped Elena down. Head up, you're my mate. That makes you their future queen. They walked through the courtyard and the crowd parted. The great hall opened before them, vast space columns rising to painted ceilings, tapestries depicting battles. At the far end, 2 thrones, one occupied by presence alone, the other empty, dust-covered waiting. A man stepped forward, 60-something, silver threading, dark hair. His smile didn't reach eyes that assessed Elena with dispassion. Lord Brennan, Van's voice carried an edge. This is Elena Cross, my mate, your future queen. The hall went silent. Then chaos gasps, shocked whispers, one woman's dramatic swoon. Brennan's expression cycled through surprise to calculation to neutrality. Your mate, how fortunate. Though surely such important announcement requires council approval. Van interrupted with alpha command. The mate bond is chosen by the goddess. The council has no authority over divine will. Brennan's smile tightened. Of course, I merely meant that protocol requires procedures. Tests to verify the bond is genuine. Elena found her voice. I've claimed nothing, didn't even know what a mate bond was until a week ago. Brennan's attention fixed on her. And yet here you stand, forgive me if I find that convenient. Van's growl rumbled. You will show my mate respect or remove yourself. Choose quickly. A woman stepped forward, mid-20s blonde, beautiful in a way that felt weaponized. Perhaps we should give the king's guest time to settle before we overwhelm her. She looks exhausted, poor thing. The condescension landed perfectly. Elena heard the real message, you don't belong. Victor's voice cut through. Lady Isabella, your compassion is noted. Isabella and her father both looked thrown by Victor's presence as a parent ally. Brennan recovered. We can discuss verification at tomorrow's council meeting. For now, welcome home, my king, and welcome to our court, Miss Cross. The dismissal was clear. Elena wasn't recognized yet, just a guest. Van led Elena through corridors designed to intimidate to his chambers in the East Tower. Functional furniture, narrow windows, everything positioned for defense. These are my chambers. You'll stay here with me. Anyone who wants to harm you goes through me first. Elena surveyed the space, noting exits, weapons, sight lines, habits from years of sleeping where violence could arrive without warning. They hate me. I felt it. Van moved to a cabinet, poured amber liquid. They fear you. There's a different occurrence. Your existence threatens power structures they've spent 3 centuries building. He handed her a glass. Lena sniffed before drinking whiskey, burning warmth. She'd never tasted alcohol. The heat made her eyes water. Van's mouth quirked. Sip it, unless you want to wake up on the floor. Elena took his advice. Brennan's not going to let this go. Van settled into a chair. Brennan leads the conservative faction. Your mother threatened their profits. Luna could settle disputes without bloodshed. After she died, they consolidated power. Elena joined him. So killing me protects their wealth. Van nodded. And their ideology. They've convinced themselves Luna brings destruction. Elena studied him. You built this. 3 decades of ruling with iron fist. Now they're afraid of me too. Van's laugh came hollow. Yes, I created monsters and called it stability. The honesty felt unguarded. Elena chose her words carefully. You said you're dying. 2 years. How much time will you spend fighting your own counsel? Van's hands shook as he raised his glass. All of it probably, but if those 2 years mean you survive, that's enough. Elena leaned forward. I don't want you dying for me. I want you teaching me to survive it without needing someone to die. Van met her eyes. Your mother would have said exactly that. The comparison landed differently, not burden, but acknowledgement. Cole entered carrying food that smelled better than anything Elena remembered. She ate with focus that bordered on desperation, and neither man commented. When Elena finally slowed, Cole spoke. The noble ladies are already circulating rumors. By morning, half the keep will believe you used witchcraft to seduce the king. Elena wiped her mouth. What do you believe? Cole's smile was genuine. I believe you are the first person in 30 years who's made Van act like someone I used to know. Van's voice came gruff. Don't romanticize it. I'm using her to atone. She's using me for protection. It's transaction. Cole's expression suggested disagreement, but he wasn't arguing. Either way, she needs training. Reading etiquette, combat. Can't face counsel as stable girl. Elena bristled. I can fight. Prove that in the village. Cole's tone stayed patient. You killed 4 men through rage. That's different from fighting trained warriors. You need technique. Van nodded. Cole will teach combat. I'll handle politics and reading. We've got maybe a week before Brennan forces verification. You need to be ready. Elena processed the timeline. 1 week to become someone I'm not. Van's correction came immediate. 1 week to become who you already are, just with better tools. Training began at dawn. Elena dressed in clothes someone had left, practical leathers that fit better than yesterday's garments. The training yard was packed, dirt-worn smooth by countless feet. Cole waited with wooden practice swords. Show me what you can do. Elena moved through basic attacks. Clumsy, uncoordinated. Cole watched, then demonstrated. His movements were economical, precise. When he finished, the dummy had 3 marks that would have been kill shots. You're thinking too much. Your wolf knows how to fight. Let her inform your human form. They drilled for 2 hours. By the end, Elena's arms burned, but she'd landed 3 touches on Cole that made him grunt approval. Van appeared carrying ancient books, reading lessons, then politics. The pattern established itself over 6 days. Mornings with Cole, learning to kill efficiently. Afternoons with Van, learning to read words, becoming sentences, becoming paragraphs. Evenings learning politics, who owed whom, which families had feuds, where power really lived. During those days, Elena learned other things. Isabella and her circle made sport of her comments, delivered just loud enough to ensure she heard. Such unfortunate hair. Queen who can't read her own proclamations. Each comment landed precisely. Elena wanted to rage, wanted to shift and show them. But Van's lessons echoed, they want you to react. Prove them wrong by staying controlled. So Elena stayed controlled, and it cost more than combat training. Maggie appeared on the 3rd day, escorted by guards. The old priestess looked aged a decade, but her face smoothed when she saw Elena whole. Their reunion happened in Van's chambers. Maggie's arms wrapped around Elena, tears soaking her shoulder. I thought they'd killed you. Elena held her. I'm harder to kill than they thought. Maggie pulled back, studied Elena's face. You've changed, something in your eyes. They talked for hours. Maggie sharing stories of Lydia, how she'd laughed, loved thunderstorms, sang old songs. Small details that built a person instead of martyr. Before leaving, Maggie pressed something into Elena's palm. A journal, leather-worn, soft pages filled with handwriting. Elena was learning to decipher your mother's. I saved it from the burning. It's yours now. After Maggie left, Elena read by candlelight while Van worked. The journal revealed Lydia as woman not icon. Funny, sarcastic, afraid sometimes but pushed through anyway. The final entry, written the day before execution, ended with words that made Elena's vision blur. If my daughter lives, tell her something Maria taught me. Real strength isn't hardness, it's having power to destroy, but choosing to heal instead. Stay gentle in a world that demands cruelty. That's how you win. Elena closed the journal carefully. Van's voice came quiet. What did she write? Elena repeated the words, and Van's hands still. Silence stretched then. I spent 30 years becoming exactly what she feared. Elena met his eyes. You're trying to change. That counts. Van's laugh held no humor. Change at 62 is just admitting you wasted 61 years. Before Elena could respond, a servant knocked. Message for the King Council demanded emergency session. Tomorrow. Topic formal verification of mate bond. Van dismissed the servant. It's starting. Brennan's making his move. The Great Hall had been transformed into theater. Council members occupied the long table, Brennan at its head, wearing satisfaction. Nobles packed the space behind, dressed like they'd come to festival. Servants lined the walls. Van sat on his throne, Elena, 3 steps below, positioned to emphasize hierarchy everyone understood. She wore simple gray dress, hair braided back. No jewelry. Nothing presumptuous. Brennan rose. We gather to address verification. The king claims mate bond. Ancient law requires proof. Van's response was ice. The bond is recognized by every wolf who can sense it. This is formality. Brennan's smile didn't waver. Formality protects us all. Elena spoke before Van could. I welcome verification. I have nothing to hide. A servant approached carrying a tray. On it rested a silver circlet, ornate and ancient metal, polished to mirror brightness. Brennan lifted it. This crown was blessed by the high priestess 3 centuries ago. True Luna can touch blessed silver without harm. Witches burn. Elena's stomach dropped, but she'd committed. She descended the steps, approached the tray, extended her hand. Her fingers closed around silver. Nothing happened. No burn, no pain. The metal was cool and smooth. Elena lifted it high enough for everyone to see her bare hands gripping blessed silver without consequence. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Brennan's face cycled through expressions before settling on forced composure. Elena set the crown back, satisfied. Brennan recovered. The silver test confirms something. Though perhaps the blessing has faded, other tests exist. Van's voice dropped to growl. The test was your idea. She passed. This ends. Brennan didn't back down. Single test proves nothing. Witches have learned to resist silver through dark arts. I propose blood test. Luna blood glows gold under moonlight. Witch blood remains red. Simple, definitive. Elena's mind raced. She'd never tested this, but Lydia's journal had mentioned it, Luna mark, that appeared under moon's light. Van's voice came sharp. Absolutely not. You're not cutting her. Elena ignored him. When Brennan's eyes gleamed. Tonight, full moon, in the courtyard where all can witness. Van was on his feet. Elena, no. Elena turned to face him. Trust me. If my blood doesn't glow, I'll leave. And you never have to choose between me and your kingdom. Van's response came barely audible. I've already chosen. Elena's smile was gentle. Then let me prove you chose right. Evening came with agonizing slowness. Elena spent hours reading Lydia's journal entries about Luna manifestation. One passage made her pause. Luna isn't something you are. It's something you channel. The goddess speaks through us, but we remain ourselves. Remember that when power threatens to drown you. Your vessel, not source. Victor appeared an hour before moonrise. His presence in Van's chambers felt like crossing threshold neither man had expected. The blood test, it's legitimate. Ancient texts confirm Luna blood glows gold under direct moonlight. Van's response was harsh. And if hers doesn't, if the manifestation hasn't completed, they'll call her witch before I can intervene. Victor's expression flickered with guilt. Then we have contingency. Cole has horses ready at the eastern gate. If the test fails, we get her out. All three of us. Van's laugh was bitter. Running from my own counsel. Victor moved to the window. We were friends once, before that night. You remember, Van didn't answer immediately. Then I remember you were better man then, so was I. Victor's hands clenched. Maria made me better. When she died, I chose to become something worse. Calculated, cold, convinced that if I controlled everything, I could prevent another Luna. Van joined him. And I chose rage, made everyone terrified. We both became exactly what our women feared. Victor's voice cracked. Elena called us on it, said we spent 3 decades becoming monsters who think killing her prevents past. She was right. Van's response came heavy. So what do we do now? Victor turned to face him directly for the first time in years. We try. Help her survive. Maybe die knowing we did one thing right. Van extended his hand and Victor stared at it. Then he took it, and the handshake held 30 years of grief and desperate hope that redemption was possible. Elena watched from across the room. My mother would have liked seeing that. Van's voice came rough. Your mother would have prevented us from ever becoming what we became. Elena stood. She couldn't prevent it. She could only hope you'd find your way back. Looks like you're trying. They walked together to the courtyard. Van on one side, Victor on the other, Elena between them. Cole waited with the council nobles, half the keep's population. Brennan stood beside a table with ceremonial blade and silver basin. The full moon hung huge overhead. Elena Cross, you claim to be Luna. Blood speaks truth. Will you submit to this final test? Elena approached. I will. Brennan lifted the blade. Elena extended her hand, palm up. The cut was quick, professional. Red welled up, dripped into the silver basin. For 3 heartbeats, nothing changed. Blood stayed red. Elena felt Van's despair through the bond, felt Victor's tension, felt her own certainty crumbling. Then moonlight shifted, caught the blood directly, and gold fire bloomed. The blood in the basin lit from within, glowing bright enough to cast shadows. Gold spread until the entire pool shone with light that hurt to look at directly. Gasps echoed, and Elena stared at her own blood, proving what she'd barely begun to believe. Brennan stepped back, shock breaking through his composure. Van's relief hit Elena like physical force. Victor's expression held vindication mixed with old grief. Elena's voice came clear. Still think I'm witch. Brennan's mouth worked, but no sound emerged. The evidence was undeniable. Van descended from the throne, crossed to Elena. The tests are satisfied. Elena Cross is Luna, my mate, and your queen. Anyone who questions this questions the goddess herself. He wrapped cloth around her bleeding hand. Elena leaned into him, slightly exhausted, and Van's arm went around her shoulders. Brennan found his voice. The council recognizes the bond. But recognition doesn't mean... Van's interruption was absolute. Doesn't mean what? That you get to demand more tests. This ends now, Brennan. The trap was elegant. Questioning further meant admitting the tests were never about verification. Brennan couldn't admit that without destroying his legitimacy. His response came stiff. The council recognizes Luna. We will discuss implications at tomorrow's session. Van's smile was sharp. You do that. Elena needs rest. 6 months transformed the keep in ways that couldn't be measured. The changes ran deep power, redistributing away from those who'd held it through fear toward those who'd earned it through competence. Elena had implemented reforms through careful navigation. Omega sanctuaries opened in 3 territories. The Luna School accepted its first class. Council representation expanded to include betas and omegas. Each reform sparked outrage, but Van's support made opposition suicidal. Elena had learned to present radical change as return to older traditions. Isabella and her circle still made sport of Elena, but the mockery had shifted from personal to political. Hard to claim someone was unworthy when her blood glowed gold. On a gray morning that promised rain, Elena found Van in his study surrounded by papers mapping kingdom finances. His handwriting had deteriorated, letters shaky. Brennan's been embezzling. 3 decades of it. 2 million in gold. Elena read over his shoulder. Can we prove it? Van tapped a ledger, not legally, but we don't need legal proof. We need political leverage. Brennan knows I know. Elena understood blackmail as deterrent. Van had learned mercy too late, but he was learning, how long have you known? Van's pause suggested uncomfortable truth. 10 years. I let it continue because keeping Brennan comfortable kept him manageable. Now I'm realizing manageable corruption is still corruption. Elena's hand found his shoulder. You're trying to fix it. That's what matters. They developed language around mortality that acknowledged without dwelling. During training, Elena had grown closer to Cole's grandson, Marcus, competent warrior who saw her as Elena, not symbol. Van had noticed, in one evening after Marcus left, he's good man, patient. When you're ready, don't feel guilty. My redemption was never your burden. Elena's throat had tightened. I'm not ready. Van's hand found hers. I know. But when you are, I'll be glad. Now Van changed subject. Lunar Festival is next week. Full moon autumn equinox. Council will expect you to preside. Elena joined him at the window. Alone, Van's response came careful. I'll be there, but visibly failing. People need to see you can lead without me. The subtext was clear. This might be Van's last public appearance. What should I prepare for? Van's reflection looked ancient. Brennan will make move. Don't know what yet. He's running out of time. Once I'm dead, he loses leverage. Elena's stomach tightened. You think he'll try something during festival? Van nodded. Maximum chaos, maximum witnesses. Victor's working intelligence, but Brennan's careful. Victor's name sparked question. How is he? Van's expression shifted. Dying, same as me. He's got 3 weeks at most, spends most of it in bed but refuses to admit it. Elena found Victor in the East Wing chambers. He lay in bed, propped against pillows, face gaunt with pain. But his eyes stayed sharp. His voice came whisper rough. You look like her. Maria. Same way of entering spaces like you own them. Elena settled beside his bed. Van says you're dying and refusing to admit it. Victor's laugh turned into cough. Van's one to talk. We're having competition. I'm losing. Elena leaned forward. Lunar Festival. Van thinks Brennan will make move. You have intelligence. Victor went focused, despite pain. Lord Kane, Brennan's successor. More aggressive. He's been recruiting mercenaries, disaffected alphas. Maybe 40 fighters. Plan his festival attack, kill you. Maybe Van blame rogue faction. Elena processed this. How do you know Victor's smile was predatory? I've spent 3 decades building spy network. Kane's careful, but not careful enough. Elena studied him. Why are you helping Willie? Victor's hand touched Maria's portrait on the nightstand. Because Maria would have. Because I'm dying anyway, and I'd rather die doing something that matters. Elena found her voice. What's the plan? Victor shifted, wincing. Van wants extra guards, but Kane's counting on that. More guards mean more chaos. So fewer guards better positioned. You, Van, and me at center. Cole, an elite unit forming perimeter. Let Kane commit, then crush them. Send message. Elena heard the problem. You can barely stand. Victor's response came flat. I'm dying in 3 weeks. Rather go out fighting. Let me have that much. Elena wanted to argue, but the determination in his eyes stopped her. Victor had earned the right to choose his death. Van agreed. Victor hesitated. Haven't asked him. Easier to apologize after. Elena stood, moved to window. He'll be furious. Victor's voice carried decades of weight. Van's been furious at me for 30 years. One more time won't matter. Rain had intensified. Elena watched water pool and imagined it read, I'll fight beside you. Both of you. Whatever comes. Victor's response was immediate. No, you're Luna. You survive. That's the point. Elena turned, I'm Luna, which means I don't hide while people die protecting me. My mother made that mistake. Look how that ended. Victor's objection died. Again, recognition crossed his face. Lydia had submitted to execution, believing passivity would prevent bloodshed. Instead, it enabled murder and decades of corruption. Victor's voice went soft. She'd be proud. Terrified, but proud. The Lunar Festival transformed the courtyard into something from stories. White flowers draped every surface, their scent mixing with incense. The full moon hung huge overhead, autumn cold making breath visible. Hundreds of witnesses packed the courtyard. Elena wore white that matched the flower's dress constructed with hidden pockets for weapons she'd insisted on carrying. The ancestral crown rested on her head, gold gleaming. Van stood beside her on the raised platform, formal attire that couldn't hide how much weight he'd lost. His hand rested on sword hilt he'd die fighting rather than waste away. Victor stood on Elena's other side. Everyone knew he was dying, fewer knew he'd switched allegiance. Seeing him beside Luna disrupted assumptions. Cole commanded elite guard positioned around the platform. 20 wolves in ceremonial armor that was fully functional. Another 50 scattered through the crowd invisible until needed. Elena began the ceremony with memorized words speaking about cycles, moon waxing and waning, seasons turning life and death as constants. Her voice carried across the courtyard, amplified by Luna power. Then Kane made his move. The attack came from 3 directions, professional coordination. 40 fighters emerged with weapons drawn, half heading for platform, half creating chaos. Elena's training kicked in before conscious thought. She dropped, low as crossbow bolt, whistled past, grabbed knife from her pocket, threw it into the throat of the fighter, charging Van's blindside. The man went down and Elena was already moving. Van's sword cleared its sheath with speed that defied his condition. He killed 2 attackers in seconds, but Elena saw the cost, breathing labored recovery slower. Victor fought with desperation of man who'd accepted death. He moved recklessly, taking risks no sane fighter would, and his recklessness bought time for Cole's guards to establish perimeter. Cole's voice cut through chaos, directing guards with calm from decades of crisis management. The elite unit moved like single organism. Within minutes, Kane's force was contained. Elena fought beside Van, their movements synchronized through bond. She'd cover his weak side, he'd protect her during recovery. Together, they held the platform. Then she saw Kane himself moving toward Victor with focus that suggested personal grudge. Victor saw him too, and something passed across his face that looked like relief. Victor's voice rang clear. "Kane, you want Luna dead? Go through me first." The challenge was deliberate provocation. Kane charged with 2 fighters flanking, and Victor moved to intercept with speed that shouldn't have been possible for dying man. They collided with impact Elena felt through the platform. Van tried to move toward them, but more fighters pressed the platform. He stayed where he was needed, trusting Victor to handle his battle. Elena watched Victor and Kane trade blows that would have killed lesser fighters. Victor fought with technique born from decades, but his body was failing. She saw him stumble, saw Kane's blade open his side, saw blood too dark to survive. But Victor didn't fall. He lunged inside Kane's guard, and his knife found soft tissue beneath ribs. Kane's eyes went wide, and they both went down. Elena broke from Van's side, vaulted off the platform, crossed the courtyard with speed that shocked even her. She reached Victor as Kane stopped moving, rolled the dead Alpha off. Victor's wound was bleeding too fast. Her hands went to the injury, Luna healing, attempting to kick in, but Victor's hand caught her wrist. His grip was strong. "No, don't waste power on me. Save it for others." Elena's voice came desperate. "I can heal this." Victor's smile was peaceful. "I'm dying anyway. Cancer or a combat doesn't matter. Let me go out doing something that mattered." Van appeared beside them, dropped to his knees. The sound he made wasn't quite word or cry. His hand found Victor's shoulder, and 30 years of history compressed into single touch. Victor's eyes found Van's. "We were brothers once. I'd like to remember that at the end." Van's voice broke. "We're brothers now. Should have said it sooner." Victor's grip on Elena's wrist loosened. "Keep him honest. Don't let him slide back. He needs you to remind him who he was supposed to be." Elena nodded, tears tracking. "I will." Victor's attention shifted to the moon. "Maria, I'm coming home." His breathing stopped. Van's shoulders shook, and Elena realized she was hearing him cry for the second time. Cole's voice called, "My king, it's over. Kane's faction surrendered." Van didn't seem to hear. He stayed kneeling beside Victor's body, one hand gripping his old friend's shoulder. Elena stood slowly, surveyed the courtyard littered with bodies. Her voice carried Luna power. Victor Ashford died defending Luna against those who would murder her for existing. He spent 30 years on the wrong side, and his last act was choosing right side. That's what redemption looks like, dying better than you lived. The pronouncement settled over the courtyard. Victor had been enemy to most present, but sacrificed complicated narratives. He'd earned something through his death. Van stood finally, a voice raw but carrying authority. Council will convene tomorrow. Those who participated will be tried for treason. This ends now. 3 weeks after the festival, Van stopped leaving his chambers. The decline was rapid, brutal. Elena spent days at his bedside, reading from books he'd collected, listening to stories, learning governance through anecdotes. Van dictated reforms during Clarity Council structure, Luna's authority, sanctuary expansion, education requirements. Letters started appearing, notes. Van wrote during nights when pain prevented sleep, addressed to future Elena. For when council challenges you, for when you doubt yourself, for when you miss me. Elena found one unsealed read without permission she knew he'd grant. You saved me, little moon, not from death but from dying a monster. I spent 60 years building empire of fear. You spent 6 months teaching me another way. Thank you for being the daughter I didn't deserve but needed. She set it down carefully. Vision blurred and returned to his bedside. Cole visited daily, sitting in silence. 42 years of friendship compressed into vigil. Maggie came, told Van about children in Luna's school learning to read. Van smiled. That matters more than borders, changing individual lives. On the 31st day, Van asked Elena to help him to the window. She supported his weight so little now and positioned him where he could see courtyard. First snow was falling. Van's voice was barely audible. Do you regret it, mate bond with dying old man? Elena's response came immediate. Never. You gave me purpose and family and understanding that I'm not what they said I was. Van's hand found hers, tremor so severe it was constant. Promise me something. Elena would have promised anything. What? Van's words were carefully chosen. Find mate who deserves you. Someone young, strong, who'll give you life instead of lessons about death. Elena's throat tightened. You're not my mate. You're my father. That's different. Van's expression cracked, tears tracking down sunken cheeks. I never had daughter. Thank you for being her. That night, Van's breathing changed, shallow, irregular. Elena summoned Cole, and they sat on either side while Van drifted. Near dawn, Van's eyes opened with unexpected clarity. Elena, come here. She moved closer, and Van's hand gripped hers with surprising strength. Remember what your mother wrote, what Maria taught her. Real strength isn't hardness. It's having power to destroy, but choosing to heal instead. Elena recognized the essence of her mother's words, transformed by Van's understanding. I'll remember. Van's breathing slowed. Elena felt the mate bond pulsing not with romance, but with familial love that transcended blood. Van's eyes stayed on hers. You're going to be magnificent. I'm sorry I won't see it. The breath released and didn't return. Elena felt the bond transform, not breaking, but settling into permanent shape. Grief was absolute, and she heard herself making sounds that weren't human. Cole's arms came around her. They stayed that way while sun rose. Outside, bells began tolling, slow, measured, announcing royal death. Elena held Van's hand while his body cooled. Thank you for everything, for choosing better, for giving me family, for dying having done one thing right. She walked to the ancestral tree alone. The tree had bloomed again, gold flowers among the white. Elena touched the bark and felt warmth suggesting approval. She spoke to the tree, to her mother, to Van's spirit. I don't know how to do this alone. White and gold petals fell like snow covering her shoulders. Elena felt less alone. 5 years reformed the kingdom in ways that would have been impossible with Van's shadow looming. Elena ruled without mate, having decided partnership could wait until she'd established Luna as institution rather than personality. The council had been restructured, moving toward representative meritocracy. 12 seats split equally between alphas, betas, omegas, and common wolves. Brennan had died a year after Van. Elena presided over his trial with mercy. Van had learned too late. His embezzlement and exposed his fortune, redistributed to sanctuaries. His death from heart failure during house arrest felt like exactly the ending he had earned. Isabella had appeared voluntarily at the trials, her father's crimes threatening her. Elena had watched the woman who'd tormented her and chosen grace. You're not responsible for his choices. You may remain or leave as you choose. Isabella's composure cracked. Why show mercy? Because I'm trying to be better than people who hurt me, including you. Months later, Isabella married and departed for Eastern Territories. Before leaving, she'd approached privately. I was cruel, I can't undo that, but I'm sorry. Elena had nodded acceptance without forgiveness. Some wounds healed with scar tissue. Luna's sanctuaries operated in every territory. The school system expanded 47 branches, teaching 2,000 children. Elena had written textbooks herself, refusing to sanitize complexity. Students learned about Lydia's execution and Van's corruption and Victor's redemption. Truth, not legend. Elena stood in the garden courtyard on a spring morning, 29 years old, having survived 5 years of ruling alone. The loneliness was becoming difficult to ignore. The mate bond suggested it could wait for someone else if she let it. Marcus approached Cole's grandson, 26, recently appointed beta advisor. Competent, clearly interested beyond professional capacity, but too respectful to push. Over months, he'd become friend who saw Elena, not Luna. His voice carried formality. My queen, the delegation from Eastern Territories has arrived. Trade agreement regarding Luna Stone access. Elena nodded, filing away business, while noting how Marcus's eyes tracked her. Schedule for this afternoon, and Marcus joined me for dinner tonight. Not queen and advisor, just two people talking. Marcus's surprise was genuine, followed by a smile that transformed his professionalism. I'd like that. After he left, Elena walked to the statue she'd commissioned for the ancestral tree clearing. 3 figures in bronze: Lydia with arms raised, Van protective Victor with hands outstretched. The inscription read, 3 broken by one night, redeemed by one woman, remembered by one kingdom. She placed fresh flowers, white and gold mixed, and spoke aloud. I think I'm ready to let someone in who's not dying or damaged. Is that allowed? The breeze made petals fall like approval. Elena returned to find Cole waiting. 71 still sharp. I saw Marcus. He looked happy and terrified. Elena joined him. I asked him to dinner. Figured 5 years alone was enough. Cole's smile was gentle. Van would approve. Probably make some gruff comment about time you stopped wallowing, then pretend he wasn't relieved. Elena's throat tightened. I still miss him. Both of them. Some days more than others. Cole's hand found hers. Missing them means they mattered. That's proof love survives death. That evening, Elena dined with Marcus. They talked about everything except politics. His childhood, her late education, shared frustrations with resistant nobles. When Marcus left, he paused. Thank you for tonight, for seeing me as more than Cole's grandson. Thank you for being patient, for not pushing when I wasn't ready. After he was gone, Elena read Van's final letter, saved for when she was ready to live, instead of just survive. Dear little moon, if you're reading this, you've survived long enough to consider happiness. Good. You deserve more than duty and grief. Find someone who makes you laugh. Someone who sees Elena, not Luna. Someone young enough to give you decades I couldn't. And when you do, don't feel guilty. My redemption was never your burden. My love was never your obligation. You gave me gift of being father. That was enough. Now go be magnificently, unapologetically you. That's all I ever wanted. Elena folded the letter carefully, felt something release in her chest. Permission to move forward. Blessing to build life that honored the dead without being consumed by them. She walked to the window overlooking the courtyard where Van had died, where Victor had sacrificed himself, where blood had watered ground and made room for new growth. The moon hung full autumn, turning toward winter cycles continuing. Elena whispered to ghosts, I'm going to try. To live, not just survive. To build something that lasts beyond grief. To remember you without being destroyed by remembering. White and gold petals drifted past her window. Elena took it as answer. Tomorrow she'd face delegations and treaties and endless politics. Tomorrow she'd continue reforms and manage council and handle crises. But tonight she'd sleep without nightmares, and that was victory the girl in the sanctuary could never have imagined. Roots determined where you started, but blossoms showed the world what you chose to become. Elena had been cursed child-stable girl, Luna forced into existence by desperation. Now she was queen who'd earned her crown through surviving in politics and slow death of the only father she'd known. And tomorrow maybe she'd start becoming something even better. Someone who thrived instead of survived. Someone who'd learned from monsters how not to be one. someone her mother would recognize despite never having met. The moon shone on. The kingdom slept. And Elena Cross stood watch over both guardian and ruler and daughter of legacy she'd transformed into something worth leaving behind.